My girlfriend and I crossed paths in a unique and sad way. It happened during Hurricane Katrina when her husband tragically died, and their entire house was swept away by the force of nature. The news was full of sad stories, and I was deeply concerned about their fate, but I had no idea that fate had a surprise in store for me. On a regular Sunday, I found myself in church, unaware of an unexpected encounter awaiting me. Our church had become a refuge for many families affected by the hurricane. The pastor's call for volunteers to provide temporary shelter to these families struck a chord with me. At first, the idea of opening my home to strangers was daunting, but as the pastor spoke, he shed light on a truth I hadn't realized. Many of us, including me, are often away from home due to work, leaving our homes empty most of the time. The pastor's words resonated with me because my new job as a doctor's assistant required long hours and frequent absence from home. Considering my situation, I realized that I recently bought a spacious house with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Given my busy work schedule, it made sense to offer temporary housing to those in need. In my mind, they would use a guest room as a safe haven on their journey to stability. The empty space in my house seemed like an opportunity I had overlooked as I focused on my job. Additionally, I believed that doing a good deed might lead to positive outcomes in my own life. At 29, I was a single man facing dating challenges. Despite my efforts, the women I liked didn't reciprocate, and those I got along with turned out to be incompatible. Recognizing this, I decided to live alone and wait for the right person. With renewed determination, I volunteered to offer shelter to a family in need. When I offered to help, my pastor introduced me to a 28-year-old widow, radiating beauty, who had lost her husband in Hurricane Katrina. She had 2 young daughters, aged 5 and 7, and their story deeply moved me. When I met her, my heart was touched, and we immediately connected. Her sincerity, kindness, and compatibility confirmed I had made the right decision. She and her children settled into my house quickly, and I ensured their comfort by buying new furniture, electronics, and groceries. In the first few days, work kept me busy, and I almost forgot about the people in my house. But the following morning, I returned from a business trip to a pleasant surprise. There was a soft knock on my bedroom door, and the smell of a freshly cooked breakfast filled the air. Opening the door, I was greeted by her smiling face as she brought a tray of scrambled eggs, sizzling bacon, and a cup of hot coffee to the table. All irritation disappeared as I embraced the gesture with gratitude. Breakfast in bed, a cherished childhood memory, became a regular occurrence. She treated me with great care, even tying my shoelaces before I left for work. Her children were well-mannered and addressed me with respect, calling me Dad. I became attached to them and hoped to adopt them someday. They not only took care of me, but also cleaned the house and cooked meals with the money I provided. She eventually got a job, showing her determination to be independent. Over time, she transformed from a guest into a family member in my house. We developed a strong bond, and I found myself deeply attached to her and her children. While I knew she wouldn't live with me permanently due to her job, I wished she could stay longer. The days passed quickly, and her presence became an integral part of my life. Our house radiated warmth and satisfaction when she and her children were around. Deep down, I understood that she would eventually gain independence and establish her own home. I wished her success and happiness, but the thought of her leaving stirred conflicting emotions in me. As our bond deepened, the chemistry and connection between us became evident. We found excuses to touch each other around the house, creating a strong attraction. Even simple moments, like when she cooked in the kitchen and I stood behind her, sparked desire. One evening, as we watched a late-night show and laughed together, she leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder, deepening our connection. Emotions took over, and we shared a passionate kiss, igniting further closeness on the couch. Since that night, she became more than a woman seeking refuge in my house. Our physical closeness grew, and I cherished every moment together. However, she still lived in the guest room, and the direction of our relationship remained uncertain. She had her doubts, and I respected her boundaries. In just 3 months, she landed a job as a cashier at the nearby grocery store, which marked a crucial step toward her independence. While I willingly shouldered the financial responsibilities, covering all the expenses, she used her earnings to support her children's kindergarten and buy clothes. It felt like a partnership built on love and mutual understanding, and I was prepared to keep helping her as much as I could. I stood by her side, offering unwavering support as she worked to rebuild her life. As Christmas approached, I invited her and her kids to celebrate the holiday with my family, introducing her as my girlfriend. I was relieved when my mother warmly welcomed them. She cared deeply for her and her children. However, in private, my mother shared her concerns with me. She reminded me of her children from a previous marriage and suggested I consider finding a partner without such responsibilities. Her words made me contemplate the nature of our relationship. The challenges ahead were undeniable. This relationship was unlike any I'd encountered before. It involved not only our connection, but also the integration of her children into my life. Despite my mother's warnings, I couldn't ignore the deep bond between us and the love I had for her and her children. After a heart-to-heart conversation with my mother about my girlfriend and her children, I realized her worries stemmed from love. She only wanted what's best for me. I reassured my mother, acknowledging her care and guidance, but I couldn't disregard the profound love I found in this incredible woman and her children. I reminded her that she longed for me to be in a relationship, and now she appeared concerned about the added responsibilities. In my eyes, my girlfriend was everything I ever dreamed of. She remained the same loving and compassionate person I met 4 months ago, without any major issue. She exemplified the qualities of a responsible and caring mother for her children, and I couldn't ask for more. Her inner and outer beauty continued to captivate me, and my love for her deepened every day. Her presence filled my life with positivity and rejuvenation, especially after returning from work trips. Being with her and her children brought me joy and happiness that felt surreal. Our connection was genuinely extraordinary, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. Despite the strong daily bond we shared, she consistently chose to sleep in the guest room. On one of these evenings, I mustered the courage to ask why she preferred not to spend the night in my bed. Her unexpected response made me feel guilty for bringing up such a sensitive topic. She delicately explained that she hadn't spent a night in someone else's bed since her late husband passed away. Her words carried both tenderness and pain, making me regret broaching the subject. I hugged her tightly at that moment, understanding the depth of her emotions. I realized she needed time and understanding to heal from the pain of her past. Recognizing this, I gladly gave her the space she needed. However, one evening, upon returning home from work, a strange suspicion crept in again. I noticed that my beloved cashew nuts and malt from the refrigerator had been eaten. This puzzled me, because my girlfriend and her children had no interest in these snacks. In fact, my girlfriend disliked them due to their high-calorie content. Since I knew she wasn't a fan of cashews and malt, it seemed unlikely that she was responsible for their disappearance. Rather than confront her about it, I decided not to make a big deal out of it. Yet, curiosity got the better of me, and I jokingly asked her 7-year-old daughter, with whom I often exchanged playful banter. To my surprise, she mentioned a name I had never heard before and accused this mysterious man of being the snack thief. At first, I thought it was just another playful exchange, but her serious tone and detailed account caught me off guard. It was evident she wasn't joking. According to her, a specific person came to our house when I was away for work, even staying overnight with her mother. She expressed strong disapproval of this man, leaving me in shock. The underlying message in her words was incredible, because the thought of my girlfriend being unfaithful had never crossed my mind. I trusted her completely and couldn't fathom her being unfaithful. A whirlwind of emotions, from disbelief to anger and eventually a headache, overwhelmed me. As the truth unfolded, the weight of her daughter's words instilled undeniable certainty and drove me to search for concrete evidence. Driven by the need to uncover the reality of what transpired during my 3-day absence from work, I resorted to installing hidden cameras on the porch and in the living room, discreetly recording. I anxiously awaited my return, mentally preparing for the painful truth that awaited me. As I delved into the footage, the shocking truth lay bare before me. I witnessed a man coming to my house during my absence, brazenly spending the night with my girlfriend. To make matters worse, he shamelessly indulged in my beloved nuts and malt, and even had the audacity to claim my chair. The sight of this uninvited guest assuming my role in the sanctity of my own home filled me with anger and a sense of betrayal. It was a painful truth to accept, realizing that my girlfriend had deceived me in such a profound way. Following this heart-wrenching revelation, my heart shattered into pieces, and I felt like a complete fool for having placed such unwavering trust in her. The pain and devastation were too intense to immediately confront her. I needed time to process the betrayal and come to terms with the harsh reality that now loomed over our once loving relationship. I tried to understand why she had chosen to hurt me so deeply, considering that I had invested all my emotional and physical strength into our relationship. In the days that followed, my emotions were constantly in turmoil as I embarked on a journey of deep self-reflection. It was challenging for me to comprehend the person she had become and the reasons behind her betrayal. The strong love that once bound us was now broken. My mind kept replaying our shared moments, desperately seeking any hints of her betrayal, but this only intensified my confusion and deepened the wounds of betrayal. Filled with disappointment and distrust towards women, I began mentally distancing myself from relationships. When I finally gathered the courage to confront her about the hidden camera recording, emotions overwhelmed me, creating a tense atmosphere. I called her into my room and suggested we watch the video. As we watched, tears streamed down her face, and she pleaded with me, admitting that this was not the way she wanted me to discover the truth. Overwhelmed with emotions, I insisted on knowing the identity of the man caught on the video. She explained that he was her ex-boyfriend from New Orleans, who had sought refuge in a shelter after surviving a devastating flood. I was taken aback when she disclosed that he would visit our house in my absence. My confusion deepened because I had believed her before. When she claimed she had never cheated, it became painfully clear that her words about loyalty to her late husband were fiction, as spending a night with another man shattered this illusion. This revelation cast doubt on other truths I held dear. As she continued revealing her secrets, it became apparent that she had become pregnant at a young age, but the father of her children abandoned her. When she explained why she lied about her husband's passing away, I was shocked to my core. She admitted she wanted to see how people treated the bereaved and craved the sympathy and support a widow received. At that moment, I was hit with a wave of bewilderment, realizing that the woman I had welcomed into my life and home was a stranger. The weight of betrayal crushed me, eroding trust and security in our relationship. Overcome by fear and uncertainty, I found the courage to make the painful decision to ask her to leave my house that evening. In the web of deceit she had spun, I could find no solace or peace because I could no longer hide the person responsible for such a web of lies. While the severity of her deception warranted immediate expulsion, a sense of responsibility for her 2 daughters tugged at my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving innocent children without a roof over their heads, especially considering they had been ensnared in their mother's lies. Empathy compelled me to protect and care for them. It was with a heavy heart that I informed her she had to leave my house the next day. But I couldn't simply abandon the children to their fate. Instead, I made it my mission to secure their well-being. I made the firm decision to rent an apartment for an extended stay, providing them with temporary shelter and stability. My intent was driven solely by compassion for her daughters, devoid of any remnants of affection for her. If it had been just her, I wouldn't have hesitated to send her away the same evening. Watching them leave was emotionally challenging, as I knew the sacrifices I had made to ensure a safe place for them. It served as a stark reminder of the depth of deception and its impact on innocent lives. I felt a heavy heart when I realized I had become emotionally attached to her daughters, viewing them as my own. They had become undeserving participants in this situation, and I couldn't accept that they would suffer the consequences of their mother's deceit. It was not an easy decision, but I believed it was the right one. Reflecting on the situation, I couldn't help but wonder if her affection for me had been genuine or just another facet of her lies. The uncertainty weighed on me, but I took solace in the fact that I had uncovered the truth, however little comfort it offered me at the time. The thought of starting a family with someone who had deceived me sent shivers down my spine. I was immensely grateful that the truth had come to light, saving me from potential consequences in the future. I made a resolute decision to exercise caution in relationships, giving priority to honesty and transparency. This experience left me with a whirlwind of emotions, but also provided a valuable lesson on safeguarding my heart and making informed choices. I also asked for permission to see her daughters and spend time with them in parks. To my surprise, she agreed. As time passed, I continued to work diligently and tried to spend quality time with the girls, picking them up once a week and enjoying our moments together. One day, while dining at a cafe, her older daughter mentioned that her mother had been looking unwell and acting strangely. At first, I didn't think much of her words, but when she revealed that her mom was probably sick because she gave herself a daily injection in her leg, I was taken aback. It hit me, and I understood what this meant. I reassured the girl, telling her that her mom would get better soon. I didn't know how to protect the girls from their mother, who was using illegal substances, and I consulted with my mother. She advised me to report the situation to the Child Protection Services, which I did. However, I didn't want the children to be left without warmth and love in a shelter. So I informed the Child Protection Services that I intended to adopt the girls, hoping for my mother's support. 6 months have passed since that day when my ex-girlfriend lost her parental rights. The girls spent about 2 months in a shelter, which deeply saddened me. But I managed to adopt the girls, and I felt joy. My mother supported my decision and provided all possible help in raising my newfound daughters.
I'm currently feeling really lost in my situation and need some guidance. My wife and I have been married for 17 years. We're both in our late 30s and early 40s, and we've known each other for about 23 years since high school. Here's what I know. 3 days ago, my wife came home from work, but she had to work on the 4th day. She seemed very upset and quickly packed an overnight bag before leaving. Our oldest daughter witnessed this. I tried talking to my wife, but she was too upset to speak and was in tears. She seemed almost panicked. She hasn't responded to any of our calls or texts. I contacted her parents and they eventually told me she's safe with them and asked for patience and understanding. That's all I know. I also tried reaching out to her sister, brother, and a close work friend. Her brother had no information, and her work friend said she was at work in the morning but disappeared by lunch 3 days ago. It's been 3 days now with no contact from my wife, not even with the kids. Nobody is telling us anything, and I'm here with our 3 daughters, trying to manage without her. The kids keep asking what's going on with Mom, but all I can say is that she's at her parents' house, and we need to be patient and understanding. I have a strong urge to pack up the kids and drive to her parents' house without warning. It's only a 3-hour drive, and waiting here in uncertainty is agonizing. The kids think we had a big fight and are getting a divorce, but that's far from the truth. We never fight, and the kids know that. I don't know what's happening, and my emotions are all over the place as I try to handle everything without her. If something tragic happened, wouldn't her family be the first to tell me? Maybe some past trauma resurfaced, but if it were me, I'd turn to my wife for support. We're in the dark and nothing makes sense. I'm at a loss for what to do, just sitting here with the girls, feeling worried, scared, angry, and every other emotion in this situation. Can anyone offer a logical perspective and clarity on this? I'm stuck in a cycle of confusion due to my emotional state. Update. It turns out my wife had an affair. It was a long night, and I didn't sleep much. I don't expect to spend much time on the computer today, but I did read all the posts yesterday and into the night, and I'll eventually read the responses today. Here's what I know. My father-in-law didn't call me last night, so I eventually contacted the police as many of you suggested. It turns out my wife had been having an affair for at least 2 years. Probably longer. The other man had a heart attack on Tuesday and passed away that night. My mother-in-law, and likely my sister-in-law, knew about it and were covering for her. Still, no contact from my wife, neither to me nor the girls. I'm trying to keep this information from them for now. I honestly don't know what to do from here. That's all I know, and it's almost unbearable. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers. Responding to a commenter, my oldest daughter knows about the affair. She's very sharp, and we had a long talk last night. My mom knows and plans to stay with us this week. I took time off work, and my boss, who's also a close friend, knows about the situation, which is a relief. Any support I can get right now is valuable. Responding again, yes, your assumptions are correct. My wife had an affair with an older divorced man, and the situation escalated quickly because of his wake funeral. The wake occurred the same night I called the police, so you can imagine how complicated it became. Many details are still unfolding, and I appreciate the support from everyone. I might share more about this eventually. It feels like I could write a book at this point. We've been in touch with everyone, but it's still a challenging situation. I don't drink and am trying to eat, although sleep is elusive. My priority is making sure my girls are okay. Reddit helps me relax in these difficult times. Providing more information, it's been just over a week since my D-Day, Discovery Day. Since then, I've learned that my wife's affair had been going on for over 4 years, though I still don't have the exact timeline. It likely started emotionally and then became physical. I'm curious about how the pandemic and lockdowns played a role in this situation, but I may not get all the answers. Yesterday, my in-laws unexpectedly visited their grandkids. My wife has been staying at their house since this ordeal began, which is frustrating. They only spent about 15 minutes with the girls before asking to speak with me privately. The conversation was long and complicated, but in summary, my wife wants to come home but is afraid of facing the consequences of her actions. Her parents tried to convince me to forgive her and rebuild the marriage, but I lied and said I wasn't sure about my future plans, as I intend to get a divorce. But I worry that if I disclose this, my wife won't be honest with me, and I might never learn the truth. However, I do want her to sit down with me and explain everything if that's possible. We've been together for over 17 years, including our time since high school, with 3 kids, countless memories, and shared experiences. I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me the whole story. I also want my children to see that I gave her a chance to explain herself and apologize, trying to handle things like mature adults. I'm striving to choose a path that sets the best example for my kids. I'm unsure if I'm doing it right, though. Legally, I can't prevent my wife from coming back to our home, as the lawyer has clarified. Even though I don't want it right now, if she decides to return, I can't stop her. My daughters and I have established a nice routine, so I made a demand I thought would be difficult to meet. I told her she could come home when she sat down with me in person, looked me in the eyes, and openly discussed her affair from start to finish, answering all my questions honestly. She also needed to apologize to the girls in person and address their questions. I thought it was fair, considering they already know. Legally, she can return home without meeting these demands, but if she's afraid to face us, maybe we can use that to our advantage. Is this approach wrong? I'm not trying to be sneaky or dishonest. I just don't want to start living together yet if I can delay it, especially with a mandatory 90-day waiting period for divorce in our state. Her return is inevitable and we'll both need to resume work eventually, regardless of this situation. I prefer to prolong it so I can plan and improve my mental and emotional well-being. My wife has been texting our daughters, claiming she doesn't want a divorce, and repeatedly apologizing to them. They've shared the texts with me and ask about me daily. It seems that the reality of her actions is hitting her hard, especially in the last few days. How should I handle this? Was my demand unreasonable? It sounds like my wife may come home sooner than I expected. Right now, I feel confident in my current path. I'm not shaken by this because I anticipated it happening eventually. My priority is making the best decision for my daughters and myself as we move forward. I want to thank everyone who has offered encouragement, advice, and support. In response to a question about reconciliation, I appreciate your outreach. During the first day or two after discovering the affair, I was unsure about getting a divorce, but my emotions clouded my judgment. As I began to recall the lies about her girls' weekend trips, late nights due to traffic, and work-related travel, I realized the extent of her deception. Every day, I uncover new lies that were meant to deceive me and our daughters, so she could be with this other man. I apologize for the length of this response, but I needed to express these thoughts. The weekend was terrible, but my wife returned home yesterday, following a build-up throughout the week. In the past, I would have greeted her with a hug and a kiss when she entered, but this time there was an incredibly uncomfortable silence between us. She tried to hug me, but I turned away as if nothing had happened. After she settled in, I naturally asked her to tell me everything, and she again said she wasn't ready. We had the same result when we spoke on the phone earlier in the week. I insisted that her only condition for returning home was to explain her nearly 3-week absence to the family because of her love for us. However, she kept repeating that she wasn't ready for that. It was challenging not to lose my temper, but I took deep breaths to regain my composure. Unfortunately, I failed, and in frustration, I blurted out that she had been having a 4-year affair with a coworker, planned to leave me for him, and had cut ties with her entire family. And now, she walked in without fulfilling the one condition I had asked for, and told her I wanted a divorce. This is when things took a bizarre turn. Her body language and facial expression showed that she had no idea how much I knew about her affair. She looked at me with wide eyes and then stood in the kitchen, staring at the floor, saying nothing. She remained stoic, and I didn't expect this reaction. I thought she might react emotionally, confess tearfully, blame the affair on me, or suggest a serious conversation to work things out. But her response was silence. We stood in the kitchen in absolute silence for what felt like 5 minutes, and it was the strangest moment I've ever experienced. She seemed at a loss for words, and so was I. I had prepared myself for all possible scenarios for this confrontation, except for this one. So, I decided to outline everything I knew about her affair, even adding some of my assumptions about how she met her affair partner, her sister's involvement, and what happened during COVID. She continued to stare at the floor throughout my explanation. I grew angrier as I spoke because she remained silent. I did my best not to raise my voice or become obscene. Eventually, I composed myself, and there was another prolonged, awkward silence. My anger turned into sadness as I realized the gravity of the situation. I softly asked her what I had done to drive her away, if she had ever loved me, and if the affair was worth it. Still, she didn't respond, showing no tears, no apology, no shouting, and no explanation. She just stood there with her head down. This silence hurt even more than D-Day did. I kept staring at her, unsure of what to do. And then it got worse. Our daughters had overheard the entire encounter, and I feel incredibly foolish. I'd been so focused on putting their needs first over the past few weeks that I didn't consider their whereabouts when confronting my wife. Our oldest daughter stormed downstairs and expressed a lot of pent-up anger. My wife quickly ran upstairs and locked herself in the bedroom. That's where we are now. I heard my wife crying for most of the night until I fell asleep. Only our youngest daughter has attempted to talk to her, while the rest of us have avoided her. If I can muster the courage, I plan to suggest that my wife stays with her sister until we finalize the divorce. However, this is still her home, and it would be miserable for all of us to cohabit with her. I was wrong about my wife, and all of you were right. I was wrong about our years together, the memories, and the significant moments in our life. I was convinced she would beg for forgiveness and confess to everything to absolve her guilt. This is the same woman who once drove back to a farmer's market to return $10 in change she had been given by mistake. But it seems we're not worth that effort to her. Maybe we never were. Now what? Today at home was incredibly uncomfortable. My daughters and I tried to continue as we have for the past 2 weeks, but it's not the same. I just want to fast forward through all of this, past the divorce, the awkward conversations, the inevitable arguments and fights, and the drama. For those who had to live with their unfaithful spouse, how did you manage? Especially with kids. I know this is just the beginning, and I keep reading posts that promise it gets better, but I feel so far from that point. I constantly feel like screaming or crying. I'm trying my best to stay emotionally stable for my daughters, but I don't know if I can keep it up for 3 months. School will start soon, and this is my life now. Thank you all for your support and advice. I've been in a tough situation ever since my unfaithful wife returned home after I discovered her affair. I've been trying to put on a facade for my daughters, saying and thinking the right things. However, tonight I have to be honest about my feelings. As many of you mention daily, the emotions come in waves, and tonight I was hit hard, causing me to lose my composure a bit. I've already filed for divorce, but my wife, who had the affair, hasn't hired a lawyer yet. I'm trying to be patient and handle this delicately, as I see the possibility of an uncontested divorce where we handle most things ourselves. But after tonight, I'm not sure anymore. During the week, we've been living together, but on Friday nights, my wife goes to her sister's house and returns on Sunday nights. This routine has involved mostly avoiding each other, with occasional interactions between myself and the girls. Unfortunately, my oldest daughter and my wife have had some heated arguments, so they're not speaking to each other. Lately, I've been following the advice I've received here and elsewhere. I've been working hard on controlling my emotions around my wife, even though it's challenging. I've kept my interactions with her brief and indifferent, though always polite and respectful. However, tonight was different. For the past couple of Fridays, my wife would come home from work, prepare for her weekend at her sister's, and leave before I got home from work. But not tonight. She was waiting for me in the kitchen when I arrived. I tried to walk past her, but she grabbed my hand lightly and questioned my treatment of her, just because she's not ready to discuss her affair. This was the first time she even mentioned her cheating since everything came to light nearly a month ago. I tried to hold back, I promise I did. I attempted to keep my cool and walk away, but our daughters were not home at the time, and anger overwhelmed me. So I let out all my frustrations, pains, hurts, and rage. I told her everything, and I can't even estimate how long I went on. At times, my voice grew loud, and I got animated. I poured out all my emotions and the torment I've been experiencing. I could have written a 4,000-word post with all the things I said. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I cried and got emotional, and I was so angry with myself afterward. I had been doing well, and I let her get to me. I knew it would happen, and it did. I'm disappointed in myself. I've been holding in my feelings for a while, and the weight room can only do so much. For the first time, my wife also broke down and got emotional, sobbing uncontrollably. Surprisingly, I found some satisfaction in seeing her hurt like I have been. She mumbled apologies repeatedly during my outburst, and she couldn't say anything else as I left the kitchen, asking her to leave me alone. The girls came home about half an hour later and sensed that something had happened, but I wasn't ready to discuss it. And I don't think they need to know. The younger ones have been doing better, and I don't want to hinder their progress. Telling my oldest would only add to her anger, which I want to avoid. I hate this situation so much. I should have kept my composure. I should have ignored my wife and walked past her. Looking back, it seems like she wanted to start a conversation about her affair, but didn't know how. And it didn't go far because of my explosion. I've actually started worrying about her. I know some of you will criticize me for this, but I don't want any harm to come to her. She's been isolated and alone with her thoughts, with nearly everyone turning their back on her. You can say she deserves it, and that's true, but she's still a human being and the mother of my children. This is a setback for me, and I'm really disappointed in myself. I apologize for the long rant. I called my brother and vented to him too. I'll try to start over on Monday. I'm only human. Venting on her felt good, but now I'm feeling regret. Should I text my wife or should I just leave it be? My wife hasn't left me alone all week. She's been overly nice, continuously apologizing for her affair, crying and trying to engage me, even knocking on my door at night to talk. I've ignored her at times but spoken when I felt like it. However, I finally snapped at her on Wednesday night, telling her to leave me alone. Then something happened last night. Just over a month since my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home after her affair was revealed, things have gotten more uncomfortable as we cohabit. She came into my room last night after our daughters had gone to bed, asking to talk privately, which was different from how she'd been approaching me all week. I resisted at first, but eventually, we went to the garage and sat in my car to avoid arguing in front of the kids. I apologize for the length of this, but she told me everything. According to her, we talked for almost 3 hours. I'm not sure how much I should share. I stayed up all night listening to her cry for hours. I couldn't sleep, and I went through a cycle of crying, anger, resisting the urge to confront her, and repeating. Forgive me if I take a day or so to respond to anyone, but I needed to get this off my chest and try to get some sleep. Having my wife constantly apologize and beg for another chance all evening hasn't helped. Tonight, I had to leave for a few hours just to get away from her because being around her is incredibly painful. On a different note, she was introduced to her affair partner by her sister about 5 years ago, with no romantic intentions initially. He was a higher up at a company she wanted to work for and currently works at, which is how he helped her get the job. Her desire to change jobs was unrelated to her affair, but once she did, she had extra motivation. After she got the job, her affair partner began flirting with her. It started with texting, then progressed to exchanging pictures and more texting, and eventually became physical just before COVID hit. She confessed to her sister and initially wanted to come clean to me but decided to bury it and keep quiet. She claimed to have gone no contact with her affair partner soon after, but as lockdowns and restrictions eased, he reached out to her, and she resumed talking to him. When businesses reopened, the physical side of the affair also resumed. She admitted to ending the affair a couple of times out of guilt, but kept going back to him, so it never really ended. She had detailed notes about her affair timeline, which she read to me, answering questions along the way. She lied about weekend trips with the girls, work-related travel, traffic jams, issues with her parents, shopping trips, and more. There were so many lies that I believed every word, never questioning anything. These lies were a cover for her affair? Hearing all of this made me feel even worse, as many of you had predicted. However, her affection for me didn't decrease during the affair. She didn't become distant, as is often the case. Intimacy did change, but not enough to raise red flags. She confessed to falling in love with her affair partner and wanting a life with him. He was older, divorced, single, and promised her expensive gifts, vacations, and other luxuries. She started daydreaming about escaping her family responsibilities, and the thrill of being with him was too tempting to resist. She spoke candidly, with a lot of emotion, and appeared honest. Midway through her confession, I lost my composure and started crying. It was painful to hear everything, as expected. When she finished, she told me how much she loved me, always had, and was willing to do anything to save our marriage. Many of you had predicted this, but it felt disingenuous to me, as if rehearsed. I've been with her for over half my life, and I can tell when she's not being genuine. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't matter. I managed to compose myself better than last week, though I still got angry and said some unkind things, including pointing out that her affair partner was seeing multiple women, and she was just one of many to him. This seemed to upset her greatly. I had thought of a million things to say when she finally confessed, all the one-liners and responses I might throw at her. But in that emotional moment, I couldn't think of most of them. However, I knew I would ask one thing. If she had to choose between her affair partner and me, who would she pick? She hesitated and then mumbled, "That's not fair." I pressed her, and eventually she said she would choose me, of course. I told her that her hesitation was the reason I was divorcing her, as it showed she was lying again. She started sobbing, and that was the last thing she said. We sat in the car for a while with her continuing to cry, but I was tired. I eventually told her that we're divorcing and that, for the sake of our daughters, we owe it to them to co-parent civilly and be present in their lives. I also added that, given all the pain she put me through, I hoped she could handle the divorce amicably, which would demonstrate her love for me. The last thing I said, borrowed from something online, was that I kissed her on the forehead and told her I would have loved her forever. Then, I got out of the car and went to bed. That's where things stand for now. Her chance to contest the divorce has passed, but I haven't spoken to my lawyer yet. I find myself crying again and cycling through depression and anger phases. Hearing everything last night was incredibly difficult, and I could have done without it. Now that I know she could have lied or made it all up, who knows? But it aligned with everything I had pieced together in the past month. So, that's the current situation. This feels never-ending. I have a few good days, start feeling strong, and then something else happens. It feels like it's been months, yet only days at the same time. I'm going to try to sleep. Imagine the love of your life, the only person you've ever loved or kissed, telling you she cheated for over 4 years simply because she was bored. There were no issues in our relationship. She was just bored. I don't know if that makes it worse or better. Thanks for reading and for your support along the way. It's been a rough couple of nights. Very tough. I promise to make an effort to respond tomorrow after I get some sleep.